Hello, I'm Kieran and welcome to my woodworking channel. If you want to build this cool jig, which is thin rib jig on the one side and a featherboard on the other side, stick around. I originally set out to build a thin rib jig because I wanted to cut some edge banding for a plywood project that I'm working on. So I looked up some videos and I found two really good videos, one by Colin Connect, Woodworkweb, and another by Tamar by 3x3 Custom. Both really great channels with respect to this topic as well as general woodworking topic. I'll add those videos that I referenced in the description box. Please check them out if you haven't already. But unfortunately, those two videos didn't exactly meet my requirements because I have kind of a unique situation going on. Colin uses a magnetic switch to hold down his jig on top of his table saw, but unfortunately I don't have a cast iron table saw, so that's not an option for me. And Tamar uses a back ledge here as a reference, but my back ledge is split into two different stages. There's like two different smaller ledges instead of one big ledge which I can butt up the jig against. So I had to look for another option to hold my thin rib jig onto the table saw. That's where I found these miter bars on Ferrell's, but Amazon. So these are really great. These can be used for plenty of jigs. You know, they're very flexible. You can use it in a lot of different places and things like that. So I'll start the build by building the featherboard first, and then I'll turn my attention to thin rib. So this is really cool and it's a neat addition to my shop. I set up the table saw and cut the plywood square. I'll completely unplug the table saw right now. There's no power because I need to bring this board in closer and adjust the positions for the fingers for the featherboard as well as for the thin rib bolt. So approximately I'm gonna find the middle of the board. It's better that the bolt for the thin rib is kinda in the middle of the board, but it doesn't need to be exact. The position of both the thin rib as well as the featherboard fingers have to be behind the maximum blade height protrusion. So that's what I'm going to measure. Raise the blade height to the maximum, and so this is where I'm comfortable that this should be the maximum height. That means I have to be right here. I can go forward or backward depending on the blade height. I drew a line to make cuts on the table saw for featherboard fingers. I've extended out the table saw fence to get it out of the way because I'll be having my incremiter jig on the right slot. And I'm also going to set it to 45 degrees. And tighten that down. I've set the fence out to 45 degrees and I'm going to start with this position cut because the fingers are going to be in this direction at 45 degrees to this side of the featherboard, and bringing the fence stop over to this side so I can reference it off of that. Just be careful because this is a metal, and if you do a through cut it'll go and hit the blade like so. The blade will be lower but it'll still hit the blade. So you want to be careful to not do a through cut. Only make the cut till this line that you marked and then stop the saw, take the piece out and keep passing. So I'm going to adjust the blade height here. That looks good to me. Table saw back on and then reference this piece against the stop block. Like this, you need to repeat the cut individually for each tooth. Be patient, don't take any unnecessary risk. It's not worth it. So I'm going to move the fence. Second pass, I'll set the fence back half an inch and repeat it again. Don't try to bring it back, although it's very tempting. Just be patient. Again, set it back another half an inch. Halfway through, I switched the miter jig to the other slot and cut the remaining pins. Finally cleaned out the shoulders at the bandsaw. And that's how the fingers of the featherboard look like. I set up an upcut spiral bit at the router table to cut out the grooves for the miter bar to travel. Since this will be a plunge cut, I marked the start and end of the cuts with a piece of blue painter's tape. I raised the bit halfway through, made a pass, and raised it the whole way through to get a clean cut. After the first channel was cleanly cut, I cut two more channels, one at the top and one in the middle. This gives me flexibility to mount the featherboard or the thin rib jig at different positions with respect to the blade. Then on to drilling the hole to secure the furniture hex nut, which will hold a bolt that will be used as a reference for the thin rib jig. I tried to drill slowly and carefully to make sure that the drill bit was going in perpendicular to the surface. Here's a closer look at the hex nut. I mixed up 2-part epoxy and coated the outside of the hex nut and secured the nut in the drill hole. After that, I turned my attention to the bolt and I grind it flat. Usually these bolts have some lettering, that's what I'm trying to grind off. With that done, the jig is essentially complete. I added a wing nut to make sure that I'm able to tighten it or loosen it. So this goes on here, like so. This is the minimum extension, and that's a reference point. If I need to add more, I can always loosen this and then tighten down the wing nut. To mount the jig onto the table saw, I loosen the bolt on the miter bar and pass it through the middle slot. One of the 3 slots can be used depending on where the thin rib jig or the featherboard is required with respect to the blade. So the bolt that goes on the slot can be used for macro adjust to get the position roughly in, and then loosen the wing nut for the thin rib and do the fine adjustment. Once fine adjustment is done, set the thin rib jig back to place it behind the blade. I think that's enough explanation, and let's look at the demo. I reference the piece off of the bolt and then move the table saw fence to adjust so that the piece rides snugly against the fence but still referencing off of the bolt. Because the jig is behind the blade, once the piece goes through the blade, it's not putting any pressure into the piece, so there's no binding or kickback. Those are really clean strips. That looks really nice. I'm gonna capture a little close up as well. Now on to the featherboard mode. So I simply loosen this, remove some crap from here, and turn it around. Now, again, this needs to be behind the blade as well. The difference between the thin rib and the featherboard is that for thin ripping, the bolt provides the reference, but you cut it against the fence. In the featherboard mode, the featherboard just pushes the piece against the fence. The fence provides both reference as well as for helping to cut the board. In addition to pushing the workpiece against the fence, featherboard also makes sure that the workpiece only slides one way, which is forward. Another added advantage is that since I'm using standard miter bars, this can be used on other tools as well, like my bandsaw and my router table, which use the standard miter bar, same as my table saw. Thank you for watching the video. Please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button if you like the video, and leave your questions and comments in the comment section. I plan to do more videos in shop jigs, tool reviews, and general project build. So if you're interested in these things, please consider subscribing to my channel.